Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and today I wanted to sit here and talk about something that is a very typical issue in creating an API in any framework at any time, and that is cross-origin resource sharing. Okay, this is oftentimes a very confusing thing to understand in the beginning because it's such a weird thing. Okay, so what is it? This is a security feature that is in all browsers. Essentially with cross-origin, this is why sometimes you're able to make API calls outside of the browser to your custom API, but you're not able to make an API call once you try to create a website in the browser. The reason being is that as a security measure, we want to make sure that, hey, you don't create some website that just makes arbitrary calls to somebody else's API and then, add data to their database, mess with them. So they have a feature called cross-origin resource sharing, and what it does is that when requests happen, there's generally this what's called a pre-flight request. So basically, you'll oftentimes see that there's like two API calls, one with a method of options, and that's your pre-flight request. And what it's doing is just wants to know sort of what is the security measures of the server that it's making a request to. Like, am I allowed to make a request to you? Are the headers I'm making fine? Are the methods I'm using fine? And so, what determines what's allowed are the headers that the server responds with. And there's four particular headers. Okay, so let me scrip all the way down here so you can see these four headers. Here we go. And right here. So these headers right here. These are your CORS headers. Okay. So there's the access allow or control allow origin header, which is where you can define what hosts or URLs are allowed to make requests to your API. Then there's the methods access control allow methods header, where you can sit there and say post get. You can decide what types of requests are allowed to be made. So you can actually sit there and say, hey, no delete requests to the server. Access control allow headers. You can actually determine what headers are allowed. Okay. And you can also set like a max length age of the connection. So you can say it by one that I probably less likely use. But the idea is that you can use these to sort of limit what kind of requests can be made by anyone who's using your API. So that way people can't make requests you don't want them to make. They don't come from sources you don't want or whatnot. This is also frustrating when you're working with a third-party API and they're giving you CORS errors and you really want to use their API. Okay, but it's not letting you because of CORS issues. Well, that's unfortunate for you because that's just how they built their API. Okay, if you're not able to make a successful request, either you need to read their documentation to see if there's a way to get around those CORS errors, or you just have to face the fact that they don't want you using their API. Okay, there are some workarounds. There's this thing called like CORS Anywhere. So if you type in like Heroku CORS Anywhere, okay, there is this workaround. It's slow, not really what I'd recommend doing if you can, unless it's like some sort of practice project and you just really want to do this. But basically what you do here is you have some sort of URL to a proxy server, and then you kind of attach the URL you're making a request to the proxy server, and then this sort of middle application sets up all the right headers to kind of fake what you need. It's slow, and it's not really, it's kind of mean, because not mean, but like in the sense that you're trying to violate what the person who made the API is intending. Okay, they did not intend for you to make that request if you're getting a CORS error. Okay, now if you're making your own API, then your job is to add those headers in there. Okay, and this goes for all backend frameworks where you're working on Ruby on Rails, whether you're working on Django and Python, Buffalo and Go, Java Spring, or in this case, Express in JavaScript. Okay, so in this case, if I were to Google adding Express CORS headers, okay, let's see here, where to do it. Well, that's with the CORS middleware. I'll come back to that. I don't want to spoil that yet. Okay, actually how this do, adding response headers in Express. So if you want to do it the manual way, okay, you would have to manually define the response headers. Okay, so you would do this in Express, and there's something similar in every framework where you can define your response headers. And you would say, okay, access allow control origin is this, access control headers is this, and then you can define what you want and don't want in those headers. Okay, that's fine. But again, this is a typical pattern, so there should always oftentimes be middleware that kind of does this for you already. So in npm, there is, for Express, there is the CORS header. CORS middleware. Okay, you could just slap CORS arbitrarily in your middleware. Okay, trying to see if I have an example of that. Well, think about it this way. If you have CORS like this, so you import this library and use CORS like that, it just means allow everything. Allow all sources, allow all methods, allow all headers, allow everything. Ideally, what you'd like to set up is just some sort of limitation on it. Okay, so in their documentation for the CORS middleware, there's this like sort of this. Essentially, what you're able to do is you're able to pass an object into the CORS middleware. Okay, so we'll call this the CORS options object, and this actually allows specifies the origin or the methods. In this case, they're just specifying the origin. So what they did is they created an array that is a whitelist of URLs that you can't. And instead of just passing in a single origin as the origin property in that CORS object, saying, hey, this origin is not allowed, which is what they did here. See, they just specified, okay, that origin is what's allowed. Here they're creating an array so that we can specify more than one URL. So what they did is they passed, and I guess the way this works is that it takes a call, it can take a function. So the origin, you can take a function and then it runs a callback into it. How does that callback work? I'm not 100% familiar with what's going on in the hood. I could quickly take a look at the source code, but the whole point of other people coding stuff is so I don't have to. So what this basically is doing, this callback is just saying, okay, if it finds the origin that came in, if the origin that came in is inside the array, so see whitelist.indexself, so that means it's going to look in the array to see if any of the values match the string of the origin that came in. And if it's -1, that means it's not in the array. And if it's not -1, that means things are good. Okay, so then it says, okay, let it through. Call back null true. Okay, or else, say, hey, this is not allowed by CORS. Okay, and see, we don't see null true because it's not saying it's allowed. So then it would just block the request. But at bottom line, the overall point is the way you fix a CORS error is not from the request, but from the response side. So it's the server, the API, that has to send the right headers. Okay, so that way so those requests work. Okay, yeah. So this is just an example in Express, but if you're using any other framework, just look up a library that helps you do CORS for you, or you can just figure out how you manually set response headers in that framework and set the appropriate headers on the request that you want. You can do them per request, so you can actually set them on each individual route and sit there and say, okay, this route has these CORS headers, this route has these CORS headers, so that way everyone can make your GET request, but no one can make your delete request. You can have fun with it. But if you're just looking for a blanket policy, this is a good way to do it. I know I've used the CORS middleware in Django, in Buffalo, in Rails. So you guys get the idea. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.